Hey y'all, what's going on? So I love reading the comments when I can because they always spark me to kind of talk about my next thing. And what I wanted to talk about today was the religion of, trying to make a right turn. Okay, I'm gonna go after this car. Okay, what I want to talk about today is the religion of how science has become a religion. And I had somebody in the comments, they were pretty nice about it, but I knew when I said that I was gonna ruffle some feathers when I mentioned that in the last video that I did. This is what I mean. So science is supposed to be a methodology based on objectivity, right? Where there are no feelings, there's no subjectivity, there's no bias. And you know, it starts with observation of something, and then you have a hypothesis, and then you try and prove what your hypothesis is. Now with vaccines, there's just so much assumption and subjectivity that I don't think the basis from which people are calling it science, it could be called scientific. Because you think about polio, you know, did we see a blood test about like who had polio, why people were paralyzed, right? There are other theories out there with DDT, and then you know the virus getting into the central nervous system causing paralysis. You know, certain questions as to why was there a spike in polio during the late 40s, early 50s, when there was a lot of, you know, DDT and a lot of chemical stuff and a lot of orchards being sprayed with Paris green. You know, why are people like Elizabeth Kinney left out, just completely out of the picture, who was somebody that was actually curing polio? Unlike Jonas Salk, who created a vaccine, and vaccines are supposed to be a preventative, not a cure. So even if you were diagnosed with polio, a vaccine wouldn't help you, according to their theories, because you're supposed to get the vaccine so you don't get the disease. But after that, there's no cure. So I think there's a huge misconception there about polio, like the vaccine curing things, because vaccines don't cure things, okay? Maybe you might use a syringe to deliver certain types of medicine, but people don't make the distinction between a syringe and a vaccine. A vaccine is administered in a syringe, but a syringe isn't a vaccine. I hope that makes sense, okay? So, you know, there are all these assumptions, right? We see, they show us pictures of smallpox, and I've only seen a couple, really, and, you know, but we assume that, you know, everybody was just dropping left and right of smallpox, right? I was reading something the other day talking about how the English settlers gave blankets to the Native Americans, and then they were mentioning that the English were inoculated against smallpox. But I looked up when the smallpox vaccine was invented, and it wasn't invented until 1796. So there's no way that could have happened unless they're time travelers, unless the English settlers went to the future and got inoculated, quote unquote, and then came back. So there are a lot of, you know, assumptions and misconceptions, and people that, you know, claims to be pro-science, they just repeat sound bites, right? Just as people quote verses from the religious texts, but they don't really do any investigation. They're not really scientists. They're just, you know, they just and they use the word like believe, right? I believe in vaccines. Well, really, because it's not a religion, okay? So you know, people, you just think about like how people word things, and how, you know, people get so adamant and they'll say, I believe in science, I believe in facts, but yeah, they know no facts. Just like the debate. I don't think I described, I talked about the debate in the last video I did, but what happened with this debate, it was Del Bigtree and another guy, I don't remember his name, and two other channels hosted this debate between somebody that was pro-vaccine on the side and the anti-vax side. And they had a live stream on Facebook. Well, Facebook erased it, but Del, being the cool cat that he is, he knew that it was going to happen, because he knew how dirty these people play, and he recorded it, and then he re-released it on his channel, so people are able to watch it. Now, this guy that was pro-science, you know, saying that I'm pro-science, but he didn't know anything. During the whole debate, he was just assuming that all of these safety studies hasn't been done. And he's like, well, why hasn't this done? Why can't they, like, you know, create genetic markers to figure this out? And Dell's like, yeah, exactly. That's my point. So they haven't been done. So people that want to like stand by and say that vaccines are so safe and effective you know, they don't even use their common sense. They're like, okay, vaccines are safe and effective. And okay, well, if you look at the inserts, it says it's not tested for the ability to cause cancer, for ability to mutate your genetics, or the ability to impair your fertility. But yet, you know they're safe and effective. Well, how do you know if you haven't tested them? That's not scientific. That sounds like religious, like rigmarole to me. Okay, so then you have something else like, you know, the double-blind randomized placebo control study is something that was invented by, you know, the practitioners of science, quote unquote, to determine if something is, you know, is effective. So a double-blind, meaning the scientist nor the participant understands, you know, or knows who got what, right? A randomized, so it's random. So you don't know who got what, and the people that are giving the experiment and getting the experiment or experimental drug doesn't know who got what. And then double randomized placebo. Okay, and then you give one person gets a placebo, which is a sugar pill, and one gets the real substance, and then you study it for a long time. And this is what is the gold standard of science to determine whether something, a treatment, a vaccine, is effective or not. Yet, when it comes to vaccines, they're just like, do it. Even though this has not been done, right? You would have to have a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. And then people get all ruffled up and they're like, well, that's unethical. And this is what Colleen Boyle of the CDC said when she was asked in Congress, has the CDC, you know, the godfather of all, like, you know, vaccines and medicine, have they ever performed a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study? And she said no, in her mousy little Weasley voice. And then he's like, well, why not? She's like, well, it's unethical. Okay, well, you know, why did you deny the thousands of people that volunteered that don't vaccinate their children? You know, there are groups that don't, like Hasidic Jews and Amish and, you know, other indigenous people that don't use vaccines. You could have used those people, and they you know, they will willingly volunteer, but, you know, they just decided not to. So to me, that's when it becomes religion. It's not about science, it's about ego. And there's this whole, you know, misconception too, that all of the information is, you know, in agreement. And when you are evolving in a certain field, you never evolve when everybody agrees on something. You're always finding new things, new nooks and crannies, new inventions, new hypotheses in order, you know, to climb up, to give that resistance and to create something new. So there's this whole misconception, and where they're just, you know, as I'm going through the medical literature, my friend and I, we're discovering that they've just erased and they ignore, even in today's time, right? They're not talking about, like I was telling somebody that the HPV vaccine is banned in Japan, and they're able to sue they don't have the 1986, you know, vaccine injury compensation issue going in Japan. So they're suing Merck right now. And they cited side effects because a lot of girls were getting injured by the Gardasil vaccine. So they're like, Same thing with the MMR. They don't give the MMR vaccine. They take, you can get the measles vaccine. I'm sorry, the MMR is measles, mumps, and rubella. So that's how we get the measles vaccine. It's a trivalent, three vaccines in one syringe. That's how we get it. So in Japan, they don't do the MMR, citing side effects, and what they do is they have a measles vaccine, just one vaccine in a syringe, and it's optional. Yet they're not like suffering from outbreaks. And then you have Zhejiang province, who has a 99.9% measles vaccine compliant rate, yet it was recorded from 2009 to 2015 has had over 700 measles outbreaks alone. So, I mean, all of this stuff is very inconsistent with what they tell you about the safety and efficacy of vaccines. And they just, you know, repeat like, oh, vaccine saves lives. You know, and like people usually, you know, a lot of times I'll post stuff and then I'll have some, like, you know, smart ass It's just like, you know what's fun? Not getting polio. I'm like, wow, I've never heard that before. Wow, like I haven't heard that argument in about 2 seconds. But then you go down the polio rabbit hole, and then you start thinking about, you know, common things like, and I'm gonna have a guy on who's old enough, who lived through the polio scare, and you know, once you start putting the data together, once you start using your common sense, you see it's kind of like the same pattern that they're trying to do with the measles outbreak right now, right? Where they're saying, oh, all these people are getting measles and it's an epidemic. Well, the same thing with the polio scare back then. But what happened was, you know, you have there's a famous website. There's a picture. You probably all seen it. It was a room full of people in iron lungs. And by today, iron lungs are ventilators, okay? So people think, oh, the iron lung is around. Yeah, because they're ventilators, because the technology has been made smaller, just so you know, okay? So anyway, there's this room of people and their nurses walking around, and these kids are all in iron lungs, and it looks terrible. Well, I found a historic website, and basically the caption of the picture says that it was actually staged for the Hollywood, for the March of Dimes campaign, which is when they got a lot of celebrities together to talk about raising money for polio, like donate your dimes to polio. It was called the March of Dimes. It was pushed forward by FDR and Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. I think it was like Nat King Cole, like all these celebrities. There's some more celebrities I can't think of them, but they all got together, just like today, right? When you see like Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt get together. Back then, they used the celebrities of that day to push the campaign. And then, you know, you look at stuff like only less than 1% of people actually got paralyzed. The caption of the picture says it was staged for that, and then the picture is not pro-vax or anti-vaccine's website. It's just a picture talking about what was going on during that era. And the picture also says, or the caption also says, if you look in the picture, you don't see any plugs or anything associate, like they're not plugged up, they're not plugged in. So you're like, oh no, like that makes total sense, right? If polio was such an epidemic and people are, you know, getting paralyzed left and right from polio, then why, you know, where are the paralyzed polio victims now? Where are they, right? Wouldn't we see lots and lots of older people who are still paralyzed from polio? I'm not saying that, you know, and I'm not saying they weren't. I'm just not saying, I don't think it was to the degree that they're making it out to be, okay? So if you have a relative that was paralyzed by polio, then I'm not denying it, or I'm not saying that happened. I just don't think it is to the degree. Because when I think of epidemic, I think of, you know, I think of like The Stand. Have you ever seen that movie where like the opening of the movie, people are just like dead in the street, and there's dead horses and dead, like the virus just like killed everybody. Like people are getting paralyzed or getting sick in record numbers, to the point where you will be able to be a certain amount of degrees away from that person, like 2 degrees. You knew somebody who knew somebody, you know somebody personally. But it wasn't like that. And then I started asking my mom, I was like, Mom, my mom's 70, okay? My parents tell me like my parents are in their 70s, mid 70s, and so they're old enough to remember. And I was like, do you remember, like, do you know anybody that had polio? And she's like, no. I was like, what? Like, my parents would have known somebody that had polio. Now I know people that say they have. Like I said, I'm not denying it. I just don't think it was to the degree that they said it was. Now you take Elizabeth Kinney. You should look her up. There's a guy named Alan Alda who was on MASH. He was an actor, and he had polio, and he's getting interviewed. In this interview, the guy asked him about polio, and then he's like, yeah, thank God for Jonas Salk for inventing the polio vaccine. And he was like, I didn't really, the vaccine didn't cure me. He was like, I actually used a lady's method named Elizabeth Kinney, who was around during that time. And she was able to cure polio, okay? And, you know, people were so butthurt because she wasn't a scientist, she wasn't a doctor, that this self-trained nurse just came around and just blew all of them out of the water. You know, that they sabotaged her. It was about ego. It wasn't about trying to heal people. It wasn't about trying to help people. It was about saving their precious ego. And she was a real woman. You can look her up. Time Magazine did 2 stories on her. And they also made a movie with her starring Rosalind Russell. You can find clips of it on the internet, you know, about her life. So she was, and FDR knew about her. And she had an 80% success rate, okay? So I mean, she came to the White House at the time. She was noted as being more popular than the First Lady. She was like a megastar back then. But see, you don't know about all this stuff because they just erase it, and then, you know, they have people that, you know, bow down to science, and they're just like, science, science, science. Vaccine saves lives. You don't want to get polio. And then getting into smallpox, you have the Leicester incident in England, where after, you know, and when Jenner created the vaccine, there were so many people in medicine, in science, that were against what he was doing, but they just wiped his name out. And you know who one of those people was? It was a guy named Alfred Russel Wallace, who was actually the co-discoverer of natural selection, who was very, very, very hardcore pro-vax, okay? And he was one of those people. But, you know, you never hear about him. You hear about Darwin. You don't hear about him. But they've just erased him because, you know, they don't fit the agenda that they're trying to push. So, you know, I think they're scientists, and then they're scientists. And a lot of people have just been so brainwashed. Yes, and I'm using the word brainwash. And the thing is, I think when people hear the word brainwash, they think that you have to be ignorant. It has nothing to do with ignorant. It has to do with susceptibility. And what makes you susceptible really is your ego and your closed-mindedness. And, you know, the fact that all these people will go to universities and they're not made knowledgeable, but they memorize and regurgitate information, and they're kind of like, they're taught that they're better than everybody else, so they become closed-minded, and they only listen to certain people who they deem worthy of listening to, instead of having an open mind and taking information from different places, and coming to their own conclusions, right? Because people that are on the anti-vax side, they've actually looked at both sides. I've had to look at and compare both sides, and I see that the pro-vax side is full of shit, and they're not full of science, and they're religious nutcakes, okay? And even somebody the other day, they made a really good point talking about, like, there's a place in Europe called the Temple at Vaccina, where Jenner created the smallpox vaccine. It's called the Temple, okay? Seriously? You know, I mean, I just don't, you know, people think that you can't, you know, for something to be a religion, you have to worship a text, or worship a person, but you can worship an ideology too. You can worship an object, like vaccines, you know? So I just don't really, you know, I know people get like offended and stuff, but, you know, I'm offended that you don't follow your own rules of science. That's offensive to me. You know, you want to call me anti-science, but you're the one that's anti-science. You want to say that we're witches and shit, but, you know, you're mixing like aborted fetal cells and animal cells and chemicals and shit, and injecting into people's immune system that can't you know, excrete it properly, and you're just denying, you know, all of the people that have had reactions and saying it's anecdotal. But so is polio. You talk about polio, you talk about smallpox. Oh, that's anecdotal evidence. That's anecdotal. You know, I don't really know what happened to your grandpa. I don't know, you know. I think it's anecdotal. How do you guys feel about that, right? Because that's how people that have vaccine injured kids feel, or who have been vaccine injured themselves. They're like, hey, I took this vaccine and now I can't walk. Now my daughter's brain swell up, and they have autism, they have epilepsy, they have asthma, they have allergies, they have eczema, they have all this stuff. They were fine before the vaccine. Oh, well, you know, that's just anecdotal. No, so is polio, okay? So is smallpox, right? Oh, you have pictures? Okay, but they have pictures and footage of their friends and their family members and people that they love before the vaccine. Oh, we have a court that's awarded billions of dollars to people because of vaccine injury, okay? The pharmaceutical industries can't be held liable, okay? That's the only product ever where the person that makes something can't be held liable for the injury that they causes. This is just ridiculous. The amount of conflict of interest between like the HHS, the CDC, the pharmaceutical industry, the medical schools is just unprecedented. And if you had any inkling of common sense, you would see that there's a vested interest in keeping people sick and keeping people ignorant about, you know, the immune system, how it works, that vaccines are bullshit. So, I mean, I think we're the ones with the facts and the science. Thank you. Okay? So you can get butthurt like the guy in the debate, it just really ticked me off, where he was like, well, if you don't have a science background, you shouldn't be allowed to talk. How about this? How about everybody gets to talk, and then you don't get butthurt when we know more than you about this particular subject. Maybe we don't know everything about science, but you don't know anything when it comes to vaccines. So just don't get butthurt. And by the way, we get a lot of our information from other doctors and other sciences, because like I said before, there's a huge misconception that everybody is in agreement, right? There's a consensus. And history, even modern time, they're just, cherry picking the information that they want and putting it to the forefront. People act like scientists and people in science are these like holier than thou moral human beings, but they're people that are fame whores, just like there's celebrities that are fame whores, right? There's fame whore scientists that want like Nobel Prizes, or they want notoriety, and a lot of people get into this field because they want respect, because people do respect degrees, no matter how ignorant you are, no matter how much information you've memorized and regurgitated. Doesn't matter if you can't make elementary connections or use common sense. It's just that the degree is what matters, and it's so superficial, and it's just as fake as all these Hollywood reality shows, but with the science twist. So I just want to say too, it starts a lot, younger with these gifted programs, and I think there's a system, and I think I'm going to do more on that in the future, because I was in one. Thank God I discovered the arts, because I would have been probably one of those arrogant assholes, right? When I was in school, you get tested, and I think this is how they contain people's minds. They contain the people that are intelligent, right? They kind of control them. There's a system of control there. So you take these tests, you test for gifted. Oh, they put you in a special program. They separate you from the children, the normal children, right? And they give you, and they don't necessarily tell you everything. They don't use the words, oh, you're better than everybody, but you notice as a kid, because you get all the new computers, you get all the new textbooks, you go on all the field trips, right? And then you stay longer hours and have more homework, but it's because you're special. It's because you're special. It's because you worked so hard. It's because you're smarter than everybody else, okay? So then you kind of go through high school, and these gifted programs last from anywhere from depending on the state you're at, anywhere from elementary to high school to college, and then you're already preparing to get into a good college. Then you're at an Ivy League college, you're at a really good college. Oh, then nobody can tell you anything, because you just know everything, okay? You just know everything. Nobody can tell you, you're just better than everybody else. And and my advice to you is, and on the other side, there are people that worship these people, and they think that they aren't smart enough to challenge these people. So then a lot of people, they'll be like, oh, you went to Berkeley, oh, I'll just shut up. Oh, you went to Harvard, oh my God, I'm not worthy, I'm not going to challenge you, right? So then there's this whole system too of people that give these people this power, and it becomes like this worship, where you're worshiping these like intellectual deities, but guess what? They're just humans, just like everybody else. They're fallible just like everybody else. They're not omniscient. They're not omnipotent. They're people who are subject to corruption and ego and in any little thing that you are, right? And another lie that they tell you too is that like IQ, they think it's set in stone. Your IQ can decrease or increase, by the way. So, you think that you're not smart enough, and this is my hope. This is one of the reasons I keep this channel going, because I want to inform people so they have the confidence and the information to challenge these people, because this is another reason why they're getting away with this stuff, because a lot of people don't feel that they're good enough or smart enough to even challenge these people, and most of the times they are, and the ones that do, they get ostracized, they get bullied, they get ad hominem attacked, they get physically attacked, some get murdered, because these people are so butthurt. How dare they, they question the high priestesses of medicine and science? How dare they, the common folk, lay person? How dare you? So anyway, dang, this video went long, but I hope this rant makes some people think about some things. And we're in the information age now. We're in the age right now where we have the power to not be willfully ignorant. We have the power to educate ourselves and educate other people. And knowledge is power. And once you know this stuff, like, there's no turning back. You can't bully people into getting vaccinated. Nobody can bully you, right? You know your rights. You know your power. You know your information. Nobody can coerce you into doing anything, you know? So that's it, guys. All right. Oh my God, it's a 25-minute video. I wonder who's going to watch the whole thing. All right, peace and love, guys. Bye-bye. Mwah.